with timeline. Welcome to the first episode of Mixed Kid Monologues. I am your host, Tiffany Ram, and I truly believe that we can end racism in my lifetime, but first we have to acknowledge that it does exist. This series is really made to create a dialogue and share real experiences from mixed kids. My personal experience is being mixed, Black and white, biracial, African American and Caucasian, African American and European. How you want to label me doesn't really matter. I identify as Black because that is how the world sees me. I'm proudly a mixed kid. I believe that mixed kids have what I call the third consciousness. I truly believe that mixed kids have a certain perspective because we are always being more than one, both, all at the same time. You can't ask us to be one or the other or turn one or the other off. A lot of people are used to code switching, whereas that's really just our identity. So I join you to come into this world to hear these stories because racism is taught. And you may not believe racism's real, but the stories I'm about to tell you show you they are. And often, like many other behaviors and the ways that humans learn behavior, is that racism is often taught, learned, and experienced first in our own immediate and extended families. And my life experience is no different. So what I'm about to share with you in this series is my life experiences with racism in early childhood, in education, in higher education, and in my professional career. These stories are not to be taken lightly. They have not been exaggerated for any kind of cinematic effect. These are truly my life stories. And what you're going to get some insight in is my personal reflection. I'm a very insightful person. And so, well, some of my experiences are more what not to do, and my reflections on how I internalize these experiences and how they went on to shape me literally for the rest of my life. I also plan to, later in the series, introduce you to other mixed kids with other experiences. I was raised in an all-white family by my biological white mother and my white stepfather. And they couldn't have been two different kinds of white. My mom was white from the inner city, and my stepdad, well, was literally white from dairy farming country. But it's still all white. My parents raised me the only way they knew how, which was white, which unfortunately for me was sprinkled in with a little dash of bigotry. That's really just white people's way of saying racism. So join me on these stories as I give you some insight. I know I have a lot of people watching that might have their own mixed kids. They might be mixed themselves. And a lot of people have questions. But how, Tiffany? How do we change? Well, let me tell you, I'm exhausted. I'm going to be honest with you. I feel like I'm failing thus far in my own family. I am sharing this series, so hopefully those of you who have had these experiences or are trying to avoid these experiences from ever being experienced again, gain some insight. I'm not here to tell you I have the answers. I'm telling you that I hope in sharing, we find the answers together. My first story is definitely the most moving. It is the one that has had the most impact on my entire life. It is definitely the story that may or may not end my family. I said it. If racism wasn't any more real than me having to say that before I tell you this story, that should alone tell you where our country is at with dealing with racism. Here's the truth. I have to give you a little background to this story so you understand at the end when I do the self-reflection and take apart and process with you the internalization of this specific story and its impact on my entire life. My entire being is based on this second ever experience with racism in my life and why it was so impactful. So my first most significant experience with racism was at 7 years old. See, at about 6 years old, well, let's back up. I was actually born in San Antonio, Texas, to a white mom and a bio-Black dad that I've never met in my whole life. My mom left him when I was 3 months old, moved back to our home state, and actually reunited with my two older brothers, my half-brothers, dad, who was also white, who I was raised by the first 6 years of my life. So again, my whole family, white, 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 white. And I was just this brown, brown, brown. Well, one day a not so good experience happened where that man came into my room and attempted to fondle me. Keyword attempted. And I was like, bro, that's not good. I ran outside. I ran downstairs to my mom, and she kicked that man out of our house immediately. I've never had to have contact with him for the rest of my life. My brothers have a relationship with their father. It's just something like every once in a while we talk on, but to be honest, like, I just don't want to talk to him. I don't want anything to do with that man. I've made peace with that in my heart, but I am very glad that that night my mom took a stand. And she said, I'm never going to put you in harm's way of someone who could physically hurt you or sexually hurt you. My mom was a gangster. She made it clear that no one's going to mess with her baby physically. Now, keep that in your mind when I tell you the rest of this story. That was at about 6 years old. My mom didn't look back. She kicked him out. She moved on. She started dating. She officially divorced her dad, all that good stuff. She didn't look back. She started dating my stepdad. And about a year later, she knew she wanted to get married. See, by this time, we had adopted my mixed brother, and my two older brothers were hot messes, running the streets. I mean, hot messes, okay? So my mom had her hands full. She had two mixed kids. She had two white kids. We couldn't have been more blended. And we were from the city. And she met my stepdad. And they wanted to get married. So they decided it was time for us to go meet my stepdad's family, who I affectionately called Papa after many years of being in my life. So we go to meet Papa's family. Now, I was 7. I didn't know what was happening. I barely knew I was brown at this point, to be honest. Everybody I knew was different colors from the city. My whole family is white. I guess I just thought I was tan or something. I didn't really know that, like, I was different and that my difference might have an effect on me and how people might treat me. I just didn't know yet. But I probably should have sensed something was up when we drove up to the farm, about 45 minutes away from where my papa lives and where I eventually graduated high school from, and that's still the hometown and all that stuff. We drove up 45 minutes up to the farm, the actual farm. And me and my other mixed brother and my oldest brother, so 3 of the 4 siblings, were in the back seat. Now, something seemed a little awry when my stepdad let my mom and my white brother go inside, but asked me and my mixed brother to stay in the car a moment. I was like, what? But I was 7. I wasn't really paying no attention. I didn't know no better. You asked me to stay in the car, stay in the car. Fine, whatever. All right. So I was 7. I'm going to be honest. It felt like forever, you guys. I felt like I was in that car with my brother forever. And my brother looked annoyed. But we didn't have really words like that. We didn't talk like that. I was 7 and he was 13 at the time. I felt like forever. And finally, my oldest brother came out and he was pissed. He was real pissed. At this time, y'all, a little backstory about my older brother is at this time he had actually already been initiated into an all-black gang. He was the first white member of an all-black gang. We didn't know that at the time. But he came out and he was hot. My oldest brother at that time was 16. Hot. Came out, he said, y'all ain't going inside. You can't go inside. I said, what you mean we can't go inside? We drove all this way. Would I have to go to the bathroom or something? I was obnoxious. I was then. I am now. He's like, Tiffany, no. That man in there said you can't come inside because you're colored. I said, who? What? Huh? What did it? Like a crane? He said, Tiffany, because you're colored like you're black. I said, I am? Huh? What? Huh? Yeah, because you're different. You're not white. Now, my older brother, my mixed brother, knew what it was already because he had experienced racism in his life. He was very aware that he was white and black. He had been through some things already. Me, I was like, I wasn't equipped for this. My mom didn't teach me about difference. I didn't realize that someone might dislike me enough to tell me I'm not welcome in their home because of the color of my skin. I was very confused. I didn't like nothing about this. So what am I supposed to do? He said, I want to leave. I said, well, that seems logical to me, bro. Like, we out of here. He said, no, mom wants to stay. I said, Interesting. But for why? But for why? Why? Why, y'all, would we stay here? This is a true story. My granddad told my dad that we weren't welcome in the home because we were colored. I never heard that word for Black folks till that moment. I was 7 years old. I didn't know. I guess my stepdad to this day knew his dad was bigoted. I think he just thought that maybe because we were the kids that he was about to have as family, we were just going to smooth it over. But no, instead, we drove all the way up there just for that old man to say, those kids ain't allowed in here, period. And my mom and my brother threw a fit. I guess the story goes, my mom threatened not to marry my stepdad. My mom lost her shit. My brother really lost his shit. I don't know. Maybe he broke some stuff because my brother's real hot-headed. He probably made it seem, to be honest, okay? Go him, as he should have, right? And then my grandma, rest in peace. Then my grandma stepped in and said, no. No. What? No, those children aren't welcome here. We're going to figure this out because they're family. That's what my grandma said. So he's just going to have to deal with it. I mean, go grandma, right? Like, come on, grandma. But the damage is done here, people. So what happened is, my granddad was racist. Hell yeah. And I say was as in because he rests in peace. He ain't never come around. He never come around today. Here's what happened. They made us stay there. My mom didn't storm out in a heated just disgust and enragement and drive us home like, that's ridiculous. No. My brother, my oldest brother, my white brother came back outside and said, I guess y'all can meet the family out back. Out back. The first time we went to go visit my grandfather, although my grandmother said, no, we're going to love these kids. There's our family, blah, 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 blah. Love you, Grandma, but we got to speed this up. We can meet them out back. See, my grandparents literally were dairy farmers, hundreds of acres of land. So the backyard, there was, a few barns, a silo, and a huge bonfire, and everybody, all the aunts and uncles were out in the garage and the back sheds, and everybody standing around, cousins and ha, and nobody except, I don't even know who was in that house when that took place, okay? I don't know which aunt and uncles really know that happened or not. I don't actually care. I'll tell you why in the reflection part of the story. So, we are allowed to go meet everybody out back. Ooh. I'm not allowed in the house. Well, you want me to meet everybody out back. I'm 7, y'all. I don't know what's happening right here. So I looked to my brother, who's 13 at the time. I'm like, what are you going to do, bro? He was like, I'm going to sit in here as long as I can until someone tells me to come say hi. Because I don't feel comfortable here. I don't care what they said that woman said. Talking about my grandma. Talking about, whew. So I swear to you, we sat in that car for about an hour or two, and then I finally got out. I think I had to go pee or I was thirsty or something. At that point, I was just nosy. And I went out back. And I met the aunts and uncles. But when I tell you from that day till now, I don't trust none of those people. I don't. Went out of their way. One of my aunts, I've since told this story. My family's pissed that I tell him this story. And I'm like, you know what's crazy is that I'm pissed. Nobody talked to me about it since then. See, I've never trusted any of these people. So here's the point of the story. I'm going to fast forward a little bit and we're going to come back to reflection. Just so you know, I got out of the car, I walked around outside, and I met all my aunts and uncles. And when I tell you, I've never in my life trusted but one or two of my aunts and uncles. Well, 3 of them. 3. I trust 3 of my aunts and uncles of that whole batch. My papa is the youngest of 13. To only trust 3 of them. I don't trust none of my cousins, to be honest, like 2 of them, okay? On that side. Why? Behavior is learned, y'all. Behavior is learned. That man was the patriarch of his family. And you think that he didn't pass down that bigotry to a few of those 13 siblings? You don't think that some other people in this group think exactly the same way he does? And I don't know which one of you it is when I leave here. At 7 years old, I immediately realized I had an invisible enemy, and my mom wasn't prepared to protect me from it. We never talked about that moment on the way home in the car or since that day. My parents refused to acknowledge that my grandfather was racist till the day he died. I never speak to that man. He died when I was about 13 years old. When I tell you I had been up to that house about every other weekend from the time I was 7 to the time that man died, and he would not look in my direction or my brother's direction, all the other grandbabies, all the other children, everybody else's will walk by his little chair in the garage or his little chair in the house in the corner, walk up to him, pay his respects, give him a hug, say they love him, and go on with their business. And we did not do such a thing. That man didn't turn his head to acknowledge we had walked in the room. He probably didn't even know our names. He didn't give me a head nod. He didn't give me a finger point, nothing. I never get acknowledgement for being a human being in existence in my life to my grandfather till he died dead. Y'all, till he died dead. Okay? So the point of sharing this story is racism is real. At 7 years old, I had to, in my face, come face to face with real racism. I'm talking about you ain't welcome here. 7 years old. 7 years old. I ain't even made a mark on this world yet, fella. Like you hate me for why? So here's a time for reflection. The point of sharing this story is no, I didn't know my granddad a day in life. I don't know what he likes, dislikes. I don't know which one of the grandchildren was his favorite, what sports he liked, what his sports team was. I don't care. I didn't know nothing. How many cows he owned. None of that. I didn't know nothing about my granddad. Not a lick. Except that he was racist. That's the only thing I know. When he died, my grandfather was one of the most revered dairy farmers in that part of the state, to be honest. It was like over 800 people came to his wake. It was like 1,000 people at the church for his funeral. This man was revered. Everybody standing up, telling stories about this man. All my cousins have stories. And I remember blatantly one day, my male cousin of mine turned to me like, Tiffany, don't you remember? I was like, no. And just kept pushing. You have memories of a person. I don't even know who this person is. I don't know him. Why? One reason. Only one reason. I don't know this man. And no, it's not because I'm a stepchild, because there's other stepchildren in the family that eventually got hugs and acknowledgments and postcards and all this other dumb stuff. There's only one reason me and my brother never got acknowledged in life by my granddad. It's because we were Black. That's it. That's it. So the time for reflection is this. Because of that moment, it became very obvious that my parents didn't have my back on racism. My mom would leave a man who attempted to molest me, fondle me. Leave him, no questions asked. Because there was a physical threat there. She understood that threat. She could acknowledge that threat. But when it came to racism, my mom brought me back to that abuser every other weekend for the rest of his life. Subjected me to that every other weekend for the rest of his life. From age 7 to 13, I had to look my emotional abuser, because that's what racism is. That's emotional and psychological trauma. My abuser, my tyrant, in the face from 7 to 13. Every time we went there, what do you think that was comfortable? To look the first experience of racism in the face and know nobody's doing anything about it. Nobody. Some people would ask, Tiffany, what are you supposed to do? Something. Silence is not going to change the world. Silence makes no change. Silence causes scars. People silently suffer all the time. My parents not saying anything, never acknowledging it, caused me to learn that they are not to be trusted with my racial pain. Period. For the rest of my life, from that day forward, I never told my parents one story of the racism I experienced. And let me tell you, these stories and the rest of the series get deep. And to know, if you know me, I love my mother. My mother and I are super tight. We're more friends than we are mother-daughter. But when it comes to race, my mom doesn't know who I am at all. She's completely disconnected from the fact that I experience the world differently solely because I'm brown. I have never trusted my parents with any racial unjust I've ever experienced. And there's unfortunately a lot. There's a lot of stories coming that I experienced, young ages that I experienced, that I knew my parents didn't have my back. That I had to figure that out on my own. That this was my own journey because my parents did not care. They just weren't going to do nothing about it. And the worst fear was they're bigoted themselves. What I want you to learn from the story is that not talking about it is not the answer. Suffering in silence is not the answer. If you are a mixed kid and you have these stories, please subscribe, please DM me, please make a comment, please send me an email, whatever it is. Suffering in silence is not the answer. If you're a mixed kid right now and you've experienced this or you've experienced a microaggression, silence is not the answer. Racism is real. You are not crazy. And for anybody who's not a mixed kid watching, and you might have done something like this, it is never too late to undo the pain. Step one is acknowledgement. Neither one of my parents, y'all, unfortunately to this particular date, have acknowledged this moment happened and it was painful. And there is definitely something different they could have done. Taking personal responsibility for your own actions or inactions. Racism is real, and whether you intentionally did something or unintentionally did something, it has been done. Recently, someone said to me, in apartheid in South Africa, they didn't call it white privilege, they called it Black disadvantage. They realized that language is powerful and people could understand it better as Black disadvantage. One of my disadvantages being a mixed kid in my family is that I missed out on a whole opportunity to know the patriarch of the family because of my Black disadvantage. I didn't get to know my granddad, that communities of people revered, loved, championed for, simply because I'm Black. Because of Black disadvantage. The only reason I didn't get to know my granddad, and that my stepdad is upset to this day right now, because I told the story for the first time a few months ago. Upset, furious that I disrespected my granddad by telling this story. But this is my story. This is the silent suffering I carried. And I'm like, if I'm carrying this, y'all, I know someone else is. And it's not okay. And I give you permission today to take that silent suffering away. Your healing starts with being acknowledged. So whoever you have to tell, you find your ally and you tell your story, because you are not alone. Tiffany Ram is here to champion for all the mixed kids, all the Black kids adopted into white families, all those, anybody who's ever felt other and people made you feel crazy about the microaggressions that you feel. You are not crazy. This is real. Step one is acknowledgement. Yes, there is Black disadvantage in our country. It is historical, it is ingrained, and more than anything, it is learned and it is taught. We need to stop teaching our children that difference is bad. We need to stop doing that. We need to stop being afraid to have the difficult conversations, the courageous conversations, the uncomfortable conversations. Again, I didn't tell you that I had the answers. I didn't tell you that this story is going to make you feel good at the end. It should make you feel sad. I don't know my granddad. I never did. Just because I'm Black. Just because I'm Black. No other reason than I was Black. To this day, I'm one of the most highly educated people in both of my families. To this day, I'm one of the most financially successful people in both of my families, even all the struggle I've been through. But because of Black disadvantage, not only did I not know my granddad, but I can't even have these conversations with family members who have their own mixed kids. Family members that are hiding their bigotry behind having their own mixed kids. The damage is being done, everybody. It's being done. So let's not be afraid to talk about it. I share this story so we can heal through the pain together, okay? I came up to be an extraordinarily conscious Black woman. I know who I am. I'm proud of who I am. I'm fully aware that I'm Black and white. And let me tell you, as you get to hear the rest of these stories, you're going to see the insight that comes from these stories, from being mixed, from understanding white perspective and Black perspective and my own in-between perspective. We can grow and we can make change, but you first got to acknowledge this is real. My parents don't want to acknowledge there's Black disadvantage when it comes to policing. Man, I don't even know my granddad. I was an innocent little 7-year-old girl. What did you want me to do? Some family members have said, why bring it up now, Tiffany? Why didn't you do anything sooner? Why? How? When? What? I was 7. You want me to take responsibility for my racial injustice at 7 years old? Side note, there are some extraordinary young kids out here at 6, 7, 8 years old killing the game about racial injustice. So y'all do you. I was not raised like that. So I didn't know what was happening, okay? But for those of you champions, you little tiny, amazing, extraordinary, over the top, wonderfully made little champions, you keep doing it because you are literally the future. So you are never too young to be the change maker this world needs, period. But I'm telling you, at my age 7, the way my parents were acting, I wasn't ready for all that. You want me to do what? My parents are struggling now with me talking disrespectful about the dead. I'm a grown person telling my life stories from when I was 7, and they're telling me that's disrespectful. Just imagine how my brain was trying to grapple with that at 7 years old. So just know, do not defeat your own children. Do not minimize people's life experiences. What you need to do is listen. Be empathetic. Take a moment to realize not everybody experiences the world like you with your perspective or your privilege. Again, if you grew up white and poor, your white and poor experience doesn't mean that you don't have white privilege. Imagine being Black and poor and how different your life probably still would have been. So let's try to change the lingo a little bit. Black disadvantage. The point of this story was that racism is real. I experienced at the age of 7. And that I had a Black disadvantage. I didn't get to know a whole human person in my life, the most significant person in our family. I never got to know because of Black disadvantage. Just because I was Black, I didn't get to know my granddad. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Don't do that. Okay? Be better. Do better. Really, really do better. Okay. So again, I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I know where we can improve. Acknowledge it. If you see someone making a joke that's inappropriate, saying a word you know they ain't supposed to say, get uncomfortable quick. I'm not telling you have to be militant and no. Authentic, true to yourself, uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable. It is. It's going to be. I've had some blowout conversations with my parents recently. I feel like I'm in the 1940 conversation. Some dumb, icky conversations. It's not going to be comfortable, but I promise you it will be worth it. Maybe not in that moment, but small victories lead up to a battle won. Okay? So get uncomfortable, acknowledge it, authentic to who you are, and that's how we make the change. I appreciate you for joining us for episode 1. Like I said, I do not have the answers, okay? This was not about giving you the answers. This is about starting the conversations. Now, what you can expect, episode 2, I'm going to give you a few other examples of when I was faced with racism. And because I didn't have a relationship with my parents to handle racism, what the result of me internalizing racism did to me. Again, this is a very insightful series because you're going to learn through my experience with you all, sharing this with you, what happens when little Black kids internalize racism. I'm going to admit to you, during points in my life, I internalized a lot of racism. Because I'm aware of that, I know how I can avoid those pitfalls for my children or other people's children when I'm coaching other people in their identity, when I'm working with them through their own trauma. But episode 2, what you can expect is I'm going to tell you the first time I really was called the N-word. I believe I was in middle school. First time someone spit in my hair because I was Black. That was a thing. That happened. I was also in middle school. A lot of stuff happened in middle school. I'll explain why next episode. So if you didn't think that racism exists because it's 2020 or that was 2010 or that was 2000s, no, it's here, it's alive, and it's well. And those kids who were racist towards me learned that from somewhere. So again, write me a comment, questions on any platform, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. My handle is Tiff Talk TV, TIFFTALK TV. I don't have the answers, but I'll definitely join you in the journey of helping end racism. First, we have to acknowledge it exists.